to the Simpleton Podcast. This is Laura Heeman. I'm here in Hyattsville, Maryland, with my good friend, Dr. Alison Contreras. Dr. Contreras is an NFP, natural family planning professional and educator. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Laura. This is a very official, formal conversation we're having. Usually we're chatting more informally.
Yes, in the kitchen, at the park.
There's less children around right now, actually.
All right. Allison and I have been friends since 2014, and I wanted to do this podcast because I think she has a lot of interesting ideas, interesting perspective about natural family planning. I think that a lot of church energy gets spent on like convincing people that they should use the, a natural family planning, except the church's teaching. So it's a lot of apologetics and a sort of brief intro on how to practice NFP for engaged couples. But there's not a lot of conversation beyond that. And I think there's a lot of conversation to be had. So that is why I have Dr. Allison here today.
Thank you. You keep referring to my official title here, so I want to jump in with that. I am a doctor of environmental engineering, not medical. It's not a medical doctor, which is relevant when you're speaking on medical issues. So
upsetting to some people.
Yeah, upsetting to some people when they find out or people call me doctor. I am not a medical professional, although I was pre-med at one point.
Oh. Intense.
Got scared away by the other intense pre-meds. Yeah. A little bit about me is that I think maybe the most relevant thing to this conversation is that I wasn't Catholic when I learned about NFP. I became Catholic in 2007, learned about NFP probably in 2005. And I learned about NFP while I was in grad school for environmental engineering. I mentioned I was pre-med, kind of wonder what would have happened had I learned about it a couple of years before, because it really struck something inside of me. As an environmental engineer, we were focused on taking classes, looking at sustainable design, how do we work harmoniously with the environment and make solutions that are more energy efficient, therefore cost efficient and more sustainable for people long term. And when I had learned about this idea of fertility awareness and tracking the signs of a woman's body and her natural observations, and then changing your behavior correspondingly to how you wanted to proceed with having children or not, it really struck something inside of me because I kind of saw it as a way to create a sustainable solution for family planning. Give the woman the empowerment and the decision to make the ability to make those decisions, and then she has a solution for the rest of her life that doesn't need, chemicals, hormones, other reusables.
How did you even find that information? I feel like the information is really hard to access if you're not within the church.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, I'm not that old that I couldn't get Google, So I had a very specific conversation with the guy who's now my husband in terms of discussion of family planning that was, we were talking about church teaching, and that's what led me to kind of look into the science behind it. But I accepted using NFP in my life earlier than I did becoming Catholic. That was a step later. But really you can, you can, I was in grad school, I was doing research, and I did my internet search. I did my Google search, and I was looking at studies, and I was looking at what was published.
Yeah.
But you do have to look for it.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Okay. So in this podcast, we're going to use NFP, natural family planning, just because it rolls off the tongue. But I've noticed that recently people have been using the term FABM more. Can you explain that and maybe why?
Yeah. So there's a whole branding issue there in a way. NFP, natural family planning. In a way, what is more natural than taking your signs every day and writing them down and then deciding if you're fertile or not? Then doing that. I don't know. It's not there's a natural element to it in that you're not sterilizing the body. You're not changing the body in any way. But in many ways, it's not really accurately representing what's happening with the term fertility awareness-based methods, fertility awareness method, FAM, FABM. There's not really a concise FABMs. My husband's always going FABMs. Yeah. So FAM is actually the name of a book that was written by Tony Weschler.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with Taking Charge of Your Fertility.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like the secular go-to. And I say secular just because they do advocate for, condom using during or other barrier methods. So FAM has kind of come to mean that. And so it's a very specific method, this method taught in this book. So FABM is, for fertility awareness-based methods, kind of encompasses a larger subset of methods that use your natural fertility signs. Okay. And it really encompasses like, you're becoming more aware of your fertility by doing these methods. Some methods to a greater extent than others. But with that information, then, single women can use it. Married couples can use it. You can use it to achieve pregnancy. You can use it to postpone. It kind of is a bigger base than just saying like NFP, natural family planning. Like a single woman isn't planning her family. Right. Do you think she can get a lot out of a fertility awareness-based method? Right. And by charting.
Yeah. As far as branding, also, do you think there was maybe a desire to like sort of get away from the idea that NFP is like the rhythm method, which doesn't work for a great many people?
We could do a whole podcast on the rhythm method, actually. So I do think maybe, I've heard NFP, not for Protestants, also NFP, which is quite ironic. I actually teach many Protestants and many Christians, as well as non Christians. But in terms of NFP being it's just kind of a more limiting. Okay. Yeah.
Great. Well, could you tell us like maybe some as a person that has like used NFP, had a lot of friends have used NFP, like I've seen like there's a lot of like positive things that happen from using NFP that's not just managing family size, and like could you maybe share like a positive story or from, friends or clients or whatever?
Yeah. So
anonymously, obviously.
Right. Of course. So I've actually been teaching for 12 years. And during that time, I've been trained in a couple different methods. There are different methods. This is one of my big things is that I like to let people know that there's different types of NFP that you can use that are going to take different observations. Then maybe they're going to take a different level of rigor. And when you, so I've been teaching for 12 years. There's different populations that I'll teach within that. I teach a lot of engaged couples, at the start of their marriage, they're looking forward to getting married. Maybe they have a different level of exposure to what they know about NFP. Maybe they have friends and families that have learned or used NFP, and maybe they don't know anybody. Maybe they're just randomly in my class because the priest is making them, which is great because then I can be a first point of exposure to this. It's kind of a way of life, really. And so, I think when you were talking earlier about like the need to do this podcast, you kind of have this point of exposure when you're engaged. Maybe you learn about it in a high school theology of the body class, if you're lucky.
Yeah.
If you're lucky. Yeah. But then further on as you're married and practicing and using NFP, you might not hear about it anymore. And so then there definitely is a need for the dialogue, hopefully that we have here. But in terms of positive stories, one of the large populations that I do work with are couples that are trying to conceive. And I see these younger or, older couples that are getting married. The age is definitely increasing, especially in DC, our population of couples who are getting married are older
than average.
Getting older and older. But many of them are interested in conceiving right away, or, I also see infertility couples that have been dealing with infertility for decades. I think kind of some of my most inspiring stories are the couples who have conceived after a great many difficulties, just because you just get so excited for them, and it just, you know, it's just so nice to be a part of that joy during that part of their life when, you know, it's just so intimate.
I think a lot of people don't think of like NFP as like an option, like if for infertility, like that's not.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So that's like a big part of what I hope to educate couples on is knowing that, like, if you learn about this when you're younger and you learn the signs of your fertility, you kind of learn to appreciate your fertility more. And then you can also learn when the patterns are, you know, not there that indicate healthy fertility. Yeah. So then you can do something a little earlier. But I just to, you know, you asked for positive stories. I have multiple couples, most memorably recently, you know, a couple that had been contracepting during their marriage, and they had gone off to prepare for, you know, conceiving. It had been several years. They had not conceived several years. This was like 3 years. Then they tried to use IVF. They had very poor results with IVF. They couldn't even create an embryo. So it was, they couldn't even get to the stage of that would be like the moral, you know, quandary of choosing to figure out how many children to freeze. It just gets really sticky. But we have, you know, this couple, they'd done 2 rounds of IVF, and that was all their insurance had paid for. And we, you know, we were able to work with them. I was able to work with them. You know, this is like 3 more years have gone by. So it's been 6 years total. And they just conceived this past fall and are due in the spring. Wow. So that's really exciting. I have other couples who I had 2 other couples more recently who conceived after a decade of infertility.
Wow.
Being
that's
able
incredible.
to, yeah, exactly. And you're, and, you know, not only are you thinking, okay, IVF is touted as the most advanced, successful type of intervention we can do to help people conceive. It's not. Oftentimes just going back to the basics of the woman's cycle and tweaking and helping her understand these specific things, and then working with a medical practitioner. You know, typically the way the model works is that someone would work with me to educate them how to chart their cycle, how to, you know, look for the important signs, but then go on to then working with the medical practitioner to be able to then diagnose and treat based on what the test results say is irregular. And most people haven't even done that first step before they go on IVF. So this like slight, you know, preventative, really educational foundation is just being skipped over, and we're just kind of going into the bigger interventions. I think everyone should be very interested in this. Right. Just for that reason alone. I mean, from a financial, like, you know, health insurance, look at how much your premiums would go down if you're covering this $1,000 intervention. Right.
And I think this is like another kind of topic I was going to bring up later, but I'm going to bring it up now. Controversial. Why aren't we teaching it to people when they're younger? Like, it doesn't, it's a method, you know, a lot of the methods, they take a while to learn, but not only that, it's like 2 things. Like, you can use a number of the NFP methods to like detect or understand different illnesses, diseases that you have, like, for instance, endometriosis or polycystic ovarian syndrome. And these like can be very painful and very difficult for women, right? So we're gonna not give this information to like young women when it could be solving their problem, and then later on not have so many years of heartbreak early in marriage.
And I mean, especially when you look now at all the studies coming out indicating you know, putting young women on the pill, which is the standard operating procedure here for young women who come in with cycle irregularities. Just it's massively increasing levels of depression in these young women. You know, being able to teach them about their cycle instead, it would be much more beneficial. I have like a bunch of thoughts on why we don't do that.
Yeah. What's like the objection?
Yeah. I mean, I think from a Catholic perspective, maybe there would be like an outdated, if we teach them about their cycle, it's going to encourage promiscuity. I don't know. Yeah. Is that what people think? Yeah. I don't have daughters. I feel like that's can't possibly be what people think anymore, but maybe it is.
I think, I'm trying to think, I don't know if you've actually encountered that, but I know somebody who was like a Creighton practitioner who was trying to start like a class for teens, and somebody in the diocese said no for that exact reason. And we're talking like about like an 8th grade level of like biological knowledge, right? It's not.
I mean, I think there's a way to talk to women, separate the men and the women, or the teens, right? I don't know. They're young adults. They're young adults, right? Yeah. And be able to talk. I think there's ways to talk about it in groups of mixed genders, but then, specifically to talk about the women, because like it or not, they're going through this. What teenage girl doesn't want to know when her period's going to come,
right?
Just to help her prepare. But I think there's some, the thought of, when a woman is, starting to menstruate, you have like a varying fertility. So you have more irregularity in the beginning of your cycle, just like you would when a woman starts to hit menopause, premenopause. There's there's like a natural irregularity that happens before it dies off completely. And then just in the beginning, there's a natural irregularity that happens while you're like reaching the fertile years of your life. So that irregularity is what all women face. But to teach them the signs and to help them be able to kind of like understand their fertility during that time, really, in my opinion, would give them more of an appreciation for their fertility, rather than them being in the dark and thinking, okay, well, I don't know what's going on. I'm just going to like figure out a way to like make this all go away and not think about it.
Yeah.
So there is a challenge with treating, I think there's a medical challenge with treating some of teen cycle irregularity, because a lot of it is wait and see how it plays out. It's just starting, your cycle is just starting. And some women do have more irregularity than other women. So I think there's a challenge. There is a bit of a challenge there medically. But, I don't know if it's like a primary parents or the primary educator. Yeah. We don't want to, I'm not exactly sure why not. But there are some groups there are some methods that are like specifically targeted toward understanding like a teenage level, like fertility appreciation. FEM is a great method for that.
Which is not specifically Catholic.
Yeah. Right, yes. Yeah. So that's a whole other thing that maybe we're leading into. But the FEM method, the language that they use is actually just very much about understanding like what a hormone does, like break it down. Like what is a hormone doing in my body? Yeah. Why do I need hormones? Why do I need these, female reproductive hormones in my body in general, like completely unrelated to my cycle, like just in terms of brain development, circulation, and how do we just kind of like teach women this so that they learn to appreciate the presence of them in their body. And then later you can add in the way that the class is structured. You can kind of add in like the family planning. And now that you have that data, now that you have that information
and the habit of collecting that information, which is hard to attain.
Right. And and you can just put that, you can then give that instruction piece later if there's like the interest in a family planning method. Some of these other methods, it approaches everything is from a family planning perspective right away. Yeah. Yeah. And so I think some of it is the way that the methods are structured themselves, because if you're talking to a woman right away and asking her if she's using condoms or not, or other barriers or whatever other methods she's on, then like just the way just the way the method is created, it's not for a 13-year-old. Yeah. So I think that's a barrier too.
But I think it's like teens, but also unmarried women or whatever. I think that like as Catholics, we do not fear knowledge and we should not fear giving people knowledge that leads them to greater understanding and like empowerment to make good choices, Right.
I mean, it's like personally, when I was, it's a little personal here, but when I was in high school, I remember thinking that I had cancer because I had I just had a discharge. I didn't know what it was.
Oh, yeah. Oh, right? Yeah.
You have a menstruation and then you have another discharge. And I literally remember asking my mom, like, am I okay? And she was like, you're fine. That's fine. That's normal. like, oh, it'd been a great time to be like, actually,
let's
this
understand
is
exactly what that is.
Yeah. And an appreciation. I mean, kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe my mom didn't know it.
Right. I mean, yeah. This is about your mom. I think most people don't, right? Unless they've had, yeah.
I mean, this is like modern methods. We know we talked a little bit earlier about the rhythm method.
Yeah.
Maybe we did.
I said, right. We have much more sophisticated, useful, reliable methods now, right?
Yeah. We could have like
scientifically backed.
The thing about the rhythm method kind of gets a bad rap because it was actually quite complicated. It was almost like so complicated that it was impossible for women to use. There's a really like distinct, like specific algorithm you're supposed to use that if you're doing paper charting and like kind of keeping track of your data on the paper, like maybe we were 50 years ago, then it's a little more harder to calculate, harder to actually properly define the fertile window as the rhythm method did. Okay. So I feel like most people are probably not even using the rhythm method correctly. Yeah. Now we have, iPhones, we can electronically collate our data and be able that electronic data recording piece, I think is a big barrier to proper NFP use. So we have a lot of help now with modern technology.
Yeah, that's great. Related to what we've been talking about, like, is the church preparing couples well to use NFP? And I have like kind of like a little maybe pet peeve that the church is both like underselling NFP and overselling NFP. And what I mean by that is that if you go to like a marriage prep thing, not the marriage prep you did, which I'm sure was excellent. And God bless the people that do these talks because they're probably the most difficult talks to give at a marriage prep.
Real.
Yeah. But the one I got and that I think a lot of people get is like, so now we're going to talk about NFP. I'm really sorry. I know most of you guys are like cohabitating and don't really want to hear about this, but we're just going to tell you. And then the sort of calling people onto it is like, hey, at least it doesn't give you cancer, and that's like a major undersell. On the other hand, there's like a lot of like, it is so effective. Like you have total control of how you're planning your family and it's, 98% effective asterisk, like perfect use. I feel like then kind of convinces you that you can achieve perfect use, and maybe some people do, but it's actually for many couples a lot more challenging, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
But I think, I go back to when I was learning about NFP and then when I started to go through my marriage prep, this is something I kind of alluded to. I was getting really passionate about. And one thing I learned in grad school is pay attention to what you procrastinate on because that might actually be a real passion. So this is why I became, I was in grad school for environmental engineering, but I became a, Creighton instructor, symptothermal instructor first, actually, then later a Creighton instructor. And I've also received FEM training and Chart Neo training as well. So this is something I was really interested in. But as we were going through marriage prep, my husband and I was, getting really excited, very interested in this topic. I started to hear news from like my friends who had gone through marriage prep and they kind of gave similar feedback. Like this is something I was excited about. I was all gung ho and interested in, but I would receive, marriage prep, it's so great, except for that NFP class you have to take. And then it would repeatedly from multiple different friends that, they had just like the crazy couple. And every time, my husband and I do marriage prep now, we always say a prayer and we're like, just guide our words and hopefully let us not be the crazy NFP couple that people have experiences with. But who knows what they say after. Actually, I have reviews. And I do have people that eventually, take our class from a total cold point starting point. My other hope is that at least we can plant some seeds that maybe they'll come back to us later. But yeah, I've heard this idea that it can be just oversold. It's a total, I think that one of the stats people like to quote is the divorce rate of couples who use NFP. So there's a study, 2 to 4% of couples who use NFP end up divorcing. So it's very low compared to like a national average. And there's this has been called into question. Are those couples just not going to divorce anyway because they're Catholic?
Yeah,
they
don't believe in divorce,
right?
Yeah.
So, or does NFP just have this
wonderful unity?
Yes,
yeah,
totally safeguard your marriage from all ills and all evils. And I've also heard it said, if you can talk about cervical fluid, you can talk about anything, which is there's something there that if you talk about difficult things, maybe you can talk about other difficult things, but no, just talking about women's signs of fertility doesn't necessarily help you see eye to eye on your finances or whatever else it is. So I think what I like to say regarding that stat is that I do think there are couples that are conscientious about their marriage and trying to do something different in terms of maybe different from the status quo, kind of questioning this idea of, separating babies and bonding in their marriage. What does that do to other parts of our marriage? And so couples that use NFP are having that discussion, having that question kind of revisited on a more regular basis, maybe than other couples are. So I think there's something to using NFP that does safeguard a couple if they're having that kind of, honesty and reflection in their relationship. My husband says it's kind of like the difference of, you steer a ship. If you kind of steer it to slightly different degree, you're going to end up at a completely different destination than if maybe you had started off pointing this way.
Sure. Yeah. That's a good, And
I think, to the overselling, underselling, a lot of this is the way we do marriage prep in general. The practitioner, I am a Creighton practitioner with a scientific background in these different methods, right? I'm a Creighton practitioner. I'm also, again, been trained in all these other methods. And then I will speak, one of the other things we didn't mention earlier, but I have worked with FACS, the Fertility Appreciation Collaborative, to teach the science. It's factsaboutfertility.org, which is an organization that we educate medical professionals about the science behind these methods, not only how that they can better talk to their own clients, but also educating them in the first place, what is actually going on with a woman's body in terms of fertility. So that background, kind of what we do there, it's completely 100% not related to the Catholic Church. That is a medical organization that we are educating on whatever peer-reviewed literature is out there. About fertility awareness-based methods.
I think this is interesting because we don't really see this in marriage prep or whatever, but you'll give the doctors literature on here's these 8 or whatever number of methods. Here are the pros and cons. You might want to recommend this one to
a decision-making tool.
And you guys also do research about apps and which apps are effective and stuff like that. Right?
Yeah, that's actually what I was brought on originally to work on, was to study the different fertility apps that were out there at this point. It's 4 or 5 years ago. So
there's a lot more.
The landscape has changed, but to look and see, are these apps accurately, representing the methods that have been proven to be effective tools for family planning. But really what I want to go back to is this idea that this person who is responsible for teaching you the biology and the science behind your body is also then responsible for teaching the morality and the theology part of it. And I think that's kind of a tricky thing that in a way I don't enjoy mixing, because I enjoy teaching, if people have a conviction to use this method, I want to help them, but I can show them all the benefits and all the health benefits, the ways that it empowers them. But that needs to be coming from elsewhere within the church as well. We can't be relying on the NFP teacher in their 1 hour session.
A couple months before you get married.
Or a couple months if we're lucky, ideally 5-6 months if we're lucky. Some women, they come and they're getting married in a month and they're like, how do I learn NFP? And I'm like,
you can't in a month.
Right. At least you're coming a month. But
it's almost, this goes back to teaching it younger, because it's almost a just totally foreign language to most Catholics, it would maybe be easier to accept the theology if you had a more solid base of understanding.
Well, in a practical kind of viewpoint forward, and that's what happened to my husband. Quite frankly, he learned about NFP as an idea in high school, at his Catholic high school, that was like, this is like what you can use in terms of planning your family and understanding the dignity and beauty of fertility. And so he knew of it, but when I talked to him about it, he didn't know anything about it. But even having that like inkling or that idea, I don't know if at the women's high school they went into more or not. But I do think it helps people to see the practical side of it in terms of what information you can actually get.
I want to, just another idea about like preparing couples is, marriage prep, it's like a very exciting time and you want to be positive and like inviting people. But I don't know if it's like, I don't know, you don't want to be a downer at marriage prep, right? But like somehow the
tagline. Don't be a downer at marriage.
Don't be a downer at marriage prep. But I think that sometimes with the NFP, with like trying to be so positive about it, like people are not prepared for maybe, the ups and downs. There's like joys and sorrows and like the crosses that might come with using NFP. Like some people have fewer children that they hope. That's not because of NFP, but there's
reality of marriage and life.
Yeah,
like
it's like
not going as planned.
Right. And, people having fewer children than they want, people having more children more quickly than they expected or whatever. And I don't really feel like the way it's taught or what's around it, and the church support around it is like sort of helping people, I don't know, come to grips with those realities. I don't know.
Yeah. So, yeah. Is this the way the marriage prep is taught? Is this who's involved in marriage prep? Yeah. I think there's like so many questions there that are good to ask. When I look back, when I take a step back and look at even, okay, if I'm meeting with couples and talking about the specifics of their body and their individual signs and like health situations, which there's a lot to go over, who else is the one talking to them about the theology? I think the best setup I've seen is like kind of having that like witness talk during marriage prep and then like follow on. These would be some sources in terms of who you would go see then for the actual medical management part of it. And I think when the church is referring there to who they would recommend going to see, there's like a bit of an ethics question because you would want to like refer to the Catholic or a instructor who would respect the Catholic teaching of the church. This is kind of like getting a little away from what you just asked, but in terms of who else is involved in marriage prep, frequently when we help out at marriage prep, we're some of the youngest presenters. Yeah. And we tend to do the money talk and the sex talk. And so Mike always says, my husband, he's always like, we're doing like the two most difficult talks here. Money and sex, which is not true. There's, but there's a lot of potential for conflict in these, in these two topics. But we talk to these older couples who are like generously, donating their time. I think it's a great time of your life, when the kids have left, maybe you're retiring, getting close to retired. How can you give back and helping out with the marriage prep? But often what we see on the feedback forums is seeing couples who are like in the thick of it is what's really helpful to give an accurate picture of like what they should expect or what they can kind of expect. Yeah. And unfortunately, it's really hard to get couples who are in the thick of it. Right. Because they're in the thick of it. I mean, we have this story where we were doing a marriage prep and thank God it was on Zoom because that was the only way it was going to happen. But Mike was coming in off of like an international trip, literally supposed to be landing. And then we're supposed to get the kids to bed and then like jump on the Zoom call. Like, heaven forbid we had to drive somewhere. But it like took like, the stars were moved to get us at this marriage prep. And this is like one of the feedback was I wish there were more younger people. And when you're balancing kids and trying to figure out, what else are your, trying to have time for one another. How you can be involved in marriage prep. But I do think having couples in like the, 10, 15 year range, not just like we've been married a year and things are going great, range is helpful for the marriage
Yeah.
prep.
Yeah. You've talked a little bit about this, but like one tension is like, well, is this a ministry or is this like
yes, okay,
a health, thing? And it's like, well, should a person pay for ministry? On the other hand, it's like you are a professional person that has like studied this. You've spent a lot of time studying this. Your amount of knowledge is, it's really impressive, and you can't just like a casual.
You're coming to ask me a question,
exactly.
like for a reason, rather than this person over here.
And like you've had extensive training and you have extensive knowledge on this topic. I don't know. There's kind of seems to be a little bit of confusion. Like, what is this?
Yeah. And is the person teaching out of the church basement? Like, is it a ministry?
Yeah.
Is it a medical professional? And I think this is a tension that not only do people who perceive the profession, but also like within the fertility, educator sphere, it's a tension people are wrestling with. Are people doing this part-time as they raise their own young children? Are they having to pay for childcare so that they can then do this work that is not actually paid? There's a financial and an economical piece here, the business model, I guess, of how to be a fertility educator that is challenging. Yeah. And
some people, health insurances pay for classes or no?
Right. So then if you're an educator who's teaching out of a medical office and you have a medical, ideally that would be the setting, but then that's like a very more formal setting that not everyone has access to. But ideally you would be teaching with a, medical provider the doctor can say, okay, this is something you can look into. And then you can go over here and talk to this person who bills less. And they don't have to do the actual teaching. The doctor doesn't have to do the teaching. But there are, this gets into like certification. This gets into like needing to have levels of quality assurance that people will know that they can expect. There's a reason why there are different methods and why, because you need this kind of standard of care. Yeah. But that's challenging then because especially if you're doing one-on-one, if you look online, all these people doing group coaching, like there's a reason people are doing group coaching because it's can earn more money. Doing group coaching, but like teaching NFP and talking about a woman's cycle is like inherently very individual. Very personal. There are some people doing great like hybrid models, but like from what I've seen, there needs to be some individual component to it for it to be effective. Useful. Yeah. So that's just like a challenge to it. That's not saying
I guess I'm not trying to say, I think it's like maybe we need to, as like a church, sort of examine but like the ministry and the like sort of medical aspect of it and how those should be related or not or whatever.
It's on I think on an individual level, like is this a product that would be worth it on an individual, or am I considering this a ministry? Yeah. And so I think from the patient perspective, and then also from the how can it be a sustainable thing that people go into also? Yeah,
right. No, and I'm not trying to suggest what you do should be free, because it's like you're providing like a real service that you've worked really hard to be able to. But I don't know.
But in competing markets, you look and then, okay, we're going to pay for the birth control pill for everybody. Yeah. How do you compete against that? Yeah. How do you say, okay, this is something that's like going to take longer. Ultimately, because people see the fruit of it is how you compete against it, is people see the value of the education that they have for their whole life. And then they see the health benefits, not only in terms of conceiving, but being able to treat, significant cramping, abnormal bleeding, hormonal mood disorders, all that can be cycle related. Yeah. Those are reasons.
Yeah. Clark had a question he wanted me to ask you. Can you use practice NFP if you're not a type A person?
I love this question because I had actually, the short answer is yes, anyone can use NFP. I had actually I had a theory several years ago when I was looking into different methods and trying to determine which one would be best for me to teach. And then when I decided upon a method and then realized like the people who really excelled in the method were all very type A. So he's on to something. Like this is a funny joke because there's truth in it. But it touches on something because I there's this kind of like this premise or this idea that some people tout when they teach NFP or in this area that there's like one best method. And if you're type A, there might be one best method for you. And if you're type B, never figured out what the alternative to type A is. It type B? I don't like that. But if you're anyone else who's not type A, there might be a better method for you. And I think this is one reason I really like FACTS as an organization. FactsAboutFertility.org is because they are equally representing and educating about all of the different methods, very upfront with the different effectiveness rates that these different methods might obtain for the user for family planning. But there's a type A-ness to it because you're taking data, right? You're taking data on a woman's body on a regular basis. I'm an engineer. It is not unusual for engineers to really like the symptothermal method because you used to, back in the day when you used to like plot the graph and you could like slow, connect the lines and see the slope of the line and see that the slope was increasing and then therefore you're getting closer to ovulation. Like it was like a whole thing that it attracted engineers. I hate that. Which might be great for an engineer to teach it, right? Yeah. Maybe you're attracted to teaching it. In terms of use, I do think that the age we live in now, the use of different applications to be able to help you collate that data. We have the science behind, we know how to, if you have an app that like prompts automatically for you to enter in the data, it's like significantly higher use. We know, just even like changing the color when someone enters in the data is like shown to like help someone use the app more, right? Because you're trying to get more days in a row or whatever. But there are methods that and the apps help.
A lot of them help you interpret the data also. Yes.
So then, there's, I always say when I'm teaching clients, there's two parts to this. The first is learning how to take good data. And then the second is learning what to do with that data and what that means for your fertility. So the taking your data part is a big key, and that's a big stumbling block. Kids, I've heard so many stories of kids taking the sticker, baby stickers and like, great, you have like, it's by your nightstand when you don't have a toddler. And then suddenly your nightstand becomes like a war zone when you have a toddler and those little babies go everywhere. So there's the taking of the data and then there's the applying of the instructions, and apps can help with both to varying degrees of effectiveness as we looked at in our app study. But one thing that is really important to note too, I think this kind of goes into the type A thing, maybe not, leads into another. But when we're looking at methods, it is helpful for the user to understand, what makes a method effective for a user. It's kind of what we're getting at. Like, how do you find the best fit for a user? If you're type A, if you're like not going to be checking when you use the restroom multiple times a day, like what would be a good fit for you? There are ways to take your data that, don't involve continuous observation. You're taking different types of data. So, having the user be aware of different methods. And also maybe even, this is like super taboo, but the idea behind a method to begin with is a super I paused because it's super taboo in the fertility world because you stick a method, you teach a method, you stick straight to a method. And I really think the benefit that being trained in multiple methods can offer to the patient is that you understand where the method is going to be more effective. What part of the cycle is your method going to be more effective? If a patient is presenting with these characteristics, okay, that might be a little bit of a red flag that like this type of like method or this type of this instruction within the method isn't going to be effective for you. And I think that's really helpful for the user to know. The user wants to know that when they come to me, they're not necessarily saying, I want to know what that method is going to teach me specifically. They're coming to me because they want to know how to like effectively plan their family. And so I want to give them that information the best. So I actually think that that's a personal strength of being able to figure out how to best counsel an individual on what method's going to be the most effective for them.
You said like people that have been effectively using NFP for a number of years tend to combine methods as they understand them better.
Did I say that? Yeah. I think I was, yeah.
This seems like totally non-controversial, but if you were like at an NFP conference, would this be a bomb?
Yeah. I think, yeah, there are places where if you say that like, okay, well, we actually if you look at like an early day rule, you look at like a Doreen's, empirical data saying, your fertility only extends until a certain day early in the cycle based on empirical data of cycle data. To present that like that could be mixing methods depending on what you're, who you're talking to. I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but it is important because that might be a really effective rule for someone. In a situation, or maybe, looking at a post-peak method, applying a post-peak, meaning after ovulation, applying a certain set of instructions to help a couple like really determine after ovulation has occurred, determining when that fertile window is ended because there is no more egg present in the cycle. That can be really, really helpful information for a couple, that has very serious reasons to postpone. And I think learning more about, as from a practitioner side, I think we have a duty to our patients to accurately represent the data appropriately.
Yeah. All right. I wanted to bring up like a little gripe that I have with Creighton specifically. And I want to do that not because I want to drag Creighton through the mud, but because I think like Creighton has like an immense amount of like information, and wealth, right? That could be like really valuable to a lot of women. And I feel like as a user that it's like very secretive. It's hard to find out a lot about Creighton online. Like if you take the class, you get a book, and the book is really good, but I've had questions that aren't answered in the book, but aren't quite like worth scheduling another, and there's like almost nothing online. There is not a lot of information to take like to an OB or a midwife, for instance, if like Creighton would prescribe that you do something during your pregnancy. Like I have printed out information from Creighton because I was supposed to take like progesterone supplement during pregnancy to help sustain the pregnancy. And then I'm like bringing this like kind of stupid sheet of paper with this not peer reviewed study to the midwife. And she's like, okay, and it's kind of embarrassing. But also it just like does not reflect like the work that Creighton has done. Right. So I don't know if you have a comment about that.
Yeah, I have a lot of comments about that. I mentioned I'm a Creighton practitioner. I was originally trained symptothermal method, and then I became Creighton instructor actually when my husband and I were experiencing infertility, and I saw the limitation that the symptothermal method had in terms of like continuing the medical management. Like if there's an issue, like what else can I do to improve my fertility if I'm like noticing like an ovulatory defect or what have you within a cycle. And so I was noticing that within myself. And then I was also noticing that in my own patients. So I became a Creighton practitioner, learned it because the way that the Creighton model is set up is that there's the practitioner, there's a educator like profession, and then there is the training that the physician can go through. And I would venture to guess that the physicians would have a lot of the similar gripes that you would, because upon training and completion of the course, they're given this like big thick book in terms of like what to do with the patient. So it's instead of like, maybe like some highlighted like, I mean, it can never be that simple, but, like a highlighted rubric, if patient presents with this, do this, type of like pathway that you can follow and even to treat the patient. So like a couple of points I have there is the difficulty of publishing in this field in general. I kind of think, okay, even to step back further. So all that to say, I have a Creighton training. I am not like, I think you can tell at this point in the podcast interview that I have also been trained in other methods. Like I'm not of this mindset that like this is the only way. Yeah. Which sometimes you can kind of be really led to think that, given some of the training maybe that they provide. So given the difficulties publishing, I mean, what I have heard, you know, and to defend the organization or to offer an explanation, is that it's quite hard to publish in this field. If you are mentioning this, if you are mentioning fertility awareness-based methods, and the reason for that might be a rigor of research. Maybe the research is not to the rigor that would be
considered standard in the medical research,
and the defense I've heard in terms of like that when you're regarding people's pregnancies is, you know, is it even ethical to withhold a certain type of treatment from a woman who might miscarry, so then you don't even have like the strong enough study to then defend the intervention. That's kind of some of the issues when we're talking about progesterone intervention during pregnancy. I've heard that as a defense of Dr. Hilders, who's the founder, creator of Creighton method. Speaking to like some of the effectiveness studies, like when you look at, okay, is Creighton effective for postpartum? Is Creighton effective for women that have irregular cycles, continuous symptoms? Is this even an effective method? Has that data been shown? You know, it's quite hard to even publish robust studies that are looking at NFP kind of in a similar manner to how contraception would be looked at, because there is the issue of behavioral change, right, in how a method can be used in general. Like, I mean, I will tell you, I have sat across the table from a couple that said, I have no idea how we got pregnant. You know, or not I have no idea how we got pregnant. They took the class, they understand how they got pregnant. But they said this was not an intended pregnancy. And I say, well, you know, you had intercourse like on peak day. You knew that was peak day. Like what happened, you know, what's going on there? And they said, well, we knew, you know, like we were called to have intercourse on this day, but it was not intended that we would have, that we were not like necessarily planning it in advance, but we knew we were like called to have intercourse. Whatever the intimate decision was, it was our anniversary, something, you know, whatever it is. You're not going to get that with like a pill, right? The pill study is never going to have that nuance that you're going to have with like a study on NFP. Like motivation is central, and it's very difficult to judge behavior change. So I do think that affects the data. Not saying that's for all cases, but I think it affects how one can even do studies in this. You know, what population is going to say, you know, join this study of women who want to try this method of avoiding pregnancy, may or may not work. Like the people who are going to join that study are people who are like kind of okay with having kids right now, right? Like exactly. It's like you're going to be a self-selecting population. So it is a difficult thing to study and to get good, robust data that would be like a peer-reviewed type of study. I think there's that. Yeah. One thing that's interesting about that though is like, you're trying to provide this like robust data to the scientific community and like show how effective it is. But one of the things about like as the user of NFP is like you are sort of also giving up maybe false sense of control that like birth control might give you, you know, and that is like hard, you know, but I think again, that's like sort of, again, the oversell of NFP, you know, so it's like almost needs to be like a just totally separate, the effective rate to the medical, I mean, not that you don't see the data, you know, the information both ways, but it's like almost a different message needed for like people preparing for marriage. Yes. And I think you kind of asked me that earlier and maybe I kicked the can because I was thinking about something, some other question that I could answer first, but is that the oversell? Like, look, it's 98% effective if you're within this certain type of, you know, demographic and situations of completely regular cycles. So when that doesn't happen to you, or when you have a situation where you're like, wow, you really hit that, like, like margins of not sure that should have been a fertile day, but I guess it was because you're pregnant. Like how do you counsel the patient? You know, how do you help them understand the effectiveness of the method and just in general, like what God is doing in their lives? So it like NFP is intrinsically different from contraception, and I know we kind of had talked about this, like if you can use NFP with a contraceptive mindset. I think maybe you can think about NFP with a contraceptive mindset. Like
it's going to lead to a lot of heartbreak
before you're married. Maybe you can think that like, I'm going to have like 3.5 children. 3 children in 3.5 years or whatever it is. But that it's ultimately not how NFP, there is an art to it. And we do look at failures different. And I don't know if that sounds like you're talking about different sides of your mouth, but in a way, this is why, I like working with Catholic couples because they have that basic understanding of that being that children are a gift from God. That's not really like a failure, right? Like we're trying to postpone. This is our goal. And I can work with them depending on, what their motivation is that, because I get couples that come in and say, we can't conceive for a year. And then like, again, then they just suddenly decide that 2 months later, they can, and they try to, and then they're trying to, and then, maybe they don't conceive right away. And then they're really upset. And I'm like, well, this wasn't even like part of your plan last year. Is that you were, so the human heart does change like that. And that is I think one of the benefits of NFP, but you have to be willing to look at it like at a benefit.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I think because we don't always present that part, it's like leads to a lot of people like trying earnestly, but then becoming kind of disillusioned with it,
Yeah. I mean, going back to
and giving up on it ultimately. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that can happen. Going back to the Debbie Downer, no one wants to be Debbie Downer during marriage prep, but the reality of like marriage and life is that it's stressful. Like it's stressful. It's like one stress after another. Like choosing who you're going to marry is like a beautiful, beautiful, joyful journey in life. But it's also choosing who's going to be like the person at your side as you approach all of life's stresses, right? Yeah. And I heard a priest once say that he really prefers doing funerals rather than weddings, because weddings, there's like this, this sense of hope and naivete in a way that everyone is very happy, but it's kind of like an untested happiness. Yeah. Whereas at a funeral, it's very, maybe it's more somber, but it's also a celebration of the life and everything that entailed. Whereas when we're, getting married in marriage prep, you can kind of just want to focus on the happy feelings, but like anyone who's been married,
a lot of unknown quantities.
knows that's not what ultimately carries you through. Right. Those like feelings of happiness. And so I think, I've had couples in marriage prep say like, okay, don't focus too much on infertility. And from a person who's experienced infertility, wanting to say like, I think we actually need to mention this a little bit more because, 1 in 6 couples are going to experience this and it's going to blindside them. Yeah. So how do we prepare, couples for this thing that, might happen? And also, how do we also show everyone else in the room that this is not a guarantee. Like, even though you might be there with your children might be coming faster, a little bit faster for the time being. I mean, I've had people who get, have several children very quickly and then experience infertility, and it's heartbreaking. It's catastrophically heartbreaking to them, and that you might not even ever know that from them. So you have no one to talk to about it either, because no one understands their situation. Yeah.
So, and I think it's like, if you're Catholic and trying to be open to life, I think a lot of people feel very isolated when maybe they have lots of pregnancies closer together also than they expected, but you are like happy about the baby, but maybe the timing is rough or whatever. And it's like, who can you even...
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Because then the world's saying, oh, what are you doing? There's something that you can do. Yeah. And so I actually think there's like a really beautiful pairing there that happens between couples who experience infertility and couples who have like, the uber fertility or whatever you want to say. Because they're really, they can really understand each other, because I think they're actually like best friends. In a way. They don't know it, but they need to be best friends. Yeah. And I really think the thing that I like to talk about most, or the image that I like to bring up in marriage prep is really when you make the vow, you're accepting children lovingly from God. You're not demanding and you're not rejecting. Oh, and that like true open-handed, being aware that like, infertility is a disease, being able to have the resources to look into what's wrong, if there is something wrong, being okay with that spiritually. And I know sometimes there's like a barrier maybe to couples thinking, okay, maybe if I just like, think, pray harder, or maybe if I just, I think there can be a stigma with infertility sometimes of feeling like it is something that if you just relax, you can conquer, right? And conceive. Yeah. And I think
just have a glass of wine.
Right. Right. And I think there is like research that shows cortisol levels and related to ovulation and fertility, there's an awareness of how that affects fertility, but it is very not well understood. So usually that's not really a very good tool, though that can be a piece that can be helpful for mentally dealing with infertility as well. But oftentimes there is a biological component to infertility that is worth looking into. And so I think, as we talk about that piece in marriage prep, being able to accept and demand, and not demand or reject children from God, that demanding piece, like figuring out what is wrong with your body is not being demanding. Like it can lead to that potentially, but the act alone of looking into what is wrong with your health is not demanding. It's figuring out. Right. Oftentimes there's a lifestyle issue. There's a lifestyle component that's affecting their quality of life. Yeah. When you're looking at issues of infertility. So addressing those issues that are also impacting the quality of life can help people hopefully become better parents through biology. But if not, if they do become parents through adoption or foster care, being able to be like healthy is extremely important, right, for all parents. And so I think it's worth looking into what's happening in your body.
Yeah, it's not as at odds with like God's will. I'm saying with air quotes, like people feel like it's like they have to accept it. And I mean, sometimes there's not simple. I don't want to say it's simple. It's like a lot of work, but like diet or supplementing or things can affect. Right. Just an idea. Like, I think we could start kind of heading towards closing this, but I just would love to see like understanding of NFP to be like, I don't know, that we be not afraid of like giving that knowledge to people, and like even maybe inviting non-Catholics to come to understand it better, and having medical professionals be able to like look at it, engage with it. But I think like any woman that uses NFP and has been pregnant, like has been treated like an idiot, at the OB's office or with the midwife or whoever, and for women to feel like they have this understanding of their body that like even the doctor does not, they have a lot of answers and feel confident, myself included, when you go to the doctor and you say, I have this information, which I've carefully gathered, and it can be useful.
I mean, I think women who chart are super users.
Yeah. Love this baby.
Here's a baby. They're super users. They're very invested in their health. You are the baby. They're very invested in their health. They're paying attention. They have a lot more information. I can't for the life of me understand why doctors dismiss that, other than being really under a pressure crunch to like reach all the patients in an hour or something. Yeah. But I do think that when a woman brings her chart to an appointment and says, I have significant bleeding, and then can show she has significant bleeding, that's so much more helpful. And so I do think things like the fact that FACS are doing the organization has an elective, a 2-week elective that's been going gangbusters during COVID because it was online when no other medical elective was online for medical students.
That's incredible.
And the feedback we get is that there's things taught in this 2-week elective that are not taught during a whole reproductive physiology course.
Yeah. Sorry about the babies.
So
yeah.
I mean,
that's incredible.
Right. Yeah. And they're able to shadow. Part of it is that they shadow and sit in on some sessions and a practitioner with their patient, and they can see how it's taught. They can see how it's used. They can see how what things women have trouble with during the sessions. And it's been very illuminating for hopefully the next generation of physicians. Yeah. Because why would you turn away a woman who comes in with a chart and they've taken information every day about their health? Like, why would you mock that?
Right. No, absolutely.
Like if someone came in with their diabetes numbers for a month, you'd be like, great. This is like someone who's really going to follow my instructions, right? They're really going to listen to what I have to say. Yeah. They're engaged here. So I don't get that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hopefully that's disappearing.
I hope so. All right. Well, do you have anything else to add? I think this was great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me here. Yeah. And Yeah.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you found this useful, interesting. If you have any follow-up questions, maybe they could go in the comments.
Yeah, you could do another podcast.
Yeah. I apologize about the babies. Thank you very much.
So it happens.
See you later.
Alligator made up.